"Sir, stand up and leave my restaurant." The entire dining hall fell silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. Even the soft jazz music suddenly felt too loud. At the center table near the window, Haejun Minwoo and his friend Seol-an slowly looked up from their wine glasses. Haejun Minwoo leaned back in his chair, with disbelief written across his face. "What did you just say to me?" Standing before them in a black chef's coat was Dravon Ellis, the head chef and owner of Soul Seoul, one of the fastest rising restaurants in Itaewon. Her dark eyes didn't move. "I said leave." Around them, customers exchanged nervous glances. Some staff members froze in place, terrified of what would happen next. Seol-an scoffed and laughed under his breath. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Dravon Ellis crossed her arms. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. 2 grown men harassing a waitress because your coffee arrived 3 minutes late." Haejun Minwoo's jaw tightened. 5 minutes earlier, a young Korean waitress named Seorin Hwanuk had approached their table carefully, with trembling hands. "I'm very sorry for the delay, sir." But before she could place the dishes down, the younger man slammed his hand against the table. "This is cold." "It was prepared 5 minutes ago, sir," she explained softly. "Are you arguing with customers now?" Haejun Minwoo. Seorin Hwanuk bowed immediately. "No, sir, Then shut up and do your job properly." Several customers turned to stare. Seol-an smirked as Seorin Hwanuk struggled to hold back tears. Maybe this restaurant hires pretty girls because they can't hire competent ones. The table burst into cruel laughter. Seorin Hwanuk apologized again, her voice shaking, while the men continued complaining loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "This place is trash! The service is embarrassing. We should have gone somewhere else." Just then, Dravon Ellis stepped out of the kitchen. At first, she simply observed the scene quietly. The trembling waitress, the untouched food, the mocking laughter, the fear spreading across her staff's faces. Then she walked straight to their table. And now, Haejun Minwoo slowly stood from his chair. The atmosphere instantly became tense. "You're making a very dangerous mistake," he said coldly. "People disappear in Seoul for less than this." A few customers quietly grabbed their phones, but Dravon Ellis didn't move an inch. Instead, she pointed toward the exit. "Then you should leave before I embarrass you further." Seol-an laughed in disbelief. "You think you can throw us out?" "No," Dravon Ellis replied calmly. "I know I can." And for the first time that night, the entire restaurant realized the 2 powerful men had just met someone who wasn't afraid of them. Haejun Minwoo stared at Dravon Ellis for several long seconds before suddenly laughing under his breath. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. Slowly, he adjusted the sleeve of his expensive black suit and lowered himself back into his chair as though he still owned the room. The tension inside Soul Seoul tightened instantly. Nobody moved nor spoke. Even the chefs behind the glass kitchen walls had stopped cooking. Haejun picked up his wineglass calmly, swirling the dark liquid inside before lifting his eyes toward Dravon once again. "You're either very brave," he said quietly, "or very stupid." Dravon remained still. Her expression didn't change. That silence irritated him more than insults ever could. Seol-an leaned back lazily in his chair with a mocking smile. "You should apologize while you still can," he sneered. "You clearly don't understand who you're talking to." Still, Dravon said nothing. Behind her, Seorin Hwanuk stood frozen with fear, her hands trembling around the serving tray she was holding. The other employees looked equally terrified. Everyone in Itaewon knew the names Haejun Minwoo and Seol-an. Rich, connected, dangerous. Men who could destroy businesses overnight without consequences. And judging by the dangerous calmness in Haejun's eyes, that was exactly what he planned to do. Finally, Heijun reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Several customers lowered their voices. One couple quietly stood from their seats and hurried toward the exit. But not everyone looked at Dravon with sympathy anymore. A middle-aged man near the bar sighed nervously. "Miss, just apologize," he muttered carefully. "It's not worth creating this kind of trouble." Another customer nodded quickly. "He's right. Pride won't help anybody here. Just say sorry and let it end peacefully," a woman whispered from another table. Even some staff members looked toward Dravon anxiously. The fear inside the restaurant was growing fast. Sioran stepped closer carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chef, maybe we should just—" "No." Dravon's calm reply cut through the room.
Subscribe for more emotional Afro Korean stories, like this video, and comment the moment that shocked you the most.
Sioran fell silent. Dravon slowly folded her arms across her chest. "They disrespected my staff," she said evenly. "I will not apologize for protecting them." Her words stunned several people into silence. But Heijun only smiled coldly. "You still don't understand your situation." Then he placed the phone against his ear. The line connected after only 2 rings. Immediately, Heijun straightened his posture. The arrogance in his voice disappeared completely. "Boss," he said respectfully, "there's a problem." The entire restaurant became silent again. Even the soft music in the background now felt distant. Heijun listened carefully before speaking once more. "A woman insulted us publicly. Yes, at Soul and Soul." A pause. Then his expression darkened slightly. "No, boss. She refuses to apologize." Another silence followed. This time, Heijun nodded quickly. "Yes, understood." Then the call ended. Seoul smirked confidently toward Dravon. "You should have listened." But Dravon simply looked at him calmly. "Are you finished?" she asked. That composure unsettled everyone, including Heijun. 10 minutes later, black luxury vehicles began arriving outside the restaurant, one after another. The moment customers noticed them through the windows, panic quietly spread across the dining hall. Several people immediately stood from their seats. Others lowered their heads nervously. Then the restaurant doors opened. Men dressed entirely in black entered first. Tall, silent, expressionless. Their eyes scanned every corner of the restaurant with terrifying precision before they stepped aside. And then, Junseo entered. The atmosphere changed instantly. Heijun Minwoo immediately stood and bowed deeply. Even Seol lowered his head without hesitation. Fear spread visibly across Seoran's face. Everyone in Seoul's underground world knew the name Junseo, a man feared by criminals, politicians, and businessmen alike. A man powerful enough to make entire companies disappear overnight. The moment he stepped forward, customers quickly avoided eye contact. Nobody dared speak. Heijun pointed toward Dravon confidently. "Boss," he said coldly, "that's the woman." The restaurant held its breath. Slowly, Junseo lifted his eyes toward Dravon Ellis. At first, nothing happened. Then his expression changed. Slightly. His brows pulled together as if he was trying to understand something impossible. His steps slowed. The confidence in Heijun's face grew immediately. "Yes, boss," he said smugly. "That arrogant woman right there." Seol chuckled under his breath. "She still thinks she's untouchable." Heijun laughed darkly. "Don't even think about apologizing now," he mocked while staring at Dravon. "I won't listen anymore." But Dravon only looked at him quietly. Then, she smiled. Just slightly, like she was looking at a fool who had already lost without realizing it. That smile made Junseo freeze completely. The entire restaurant fell into a suffocating silence. His eyes widened. For the first time since entering the building, fear appeared on his face. Real fear. The color slowly drained from Haejun's expression. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Boss? He called nervously. But Junseo didn't answer. Instead, he suddenly rushed forward. Boss! The terrified shout echoed through the restaurant. Gasps spread everywhere. The feared underworld king who made politicians tremble was now standing in front of Dravon like an emotional child, finally reunited with someone he deeply feared and respected. Some customers rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Others genuinely thought they were hallucinating. Junseo lowered his head deeply and bowed, not out of politeness, out of absolute loyalty. My apologies. Even his voice shook. Boss. Haejun staggered backward slightly. His brain refused to process what he was seeing. Boss? No. That was impossible. Junseo carefully moved closer to Dravon before lightly resting his forehead against her shoulder like a spoiled child seeking comfort. These idiots don't know what's good for them, he muttered bitterly. Your boy will deal with them accordingly. The restaurant remained completely silent. Nobody dared breathe too loudly. Because at that moment, everyone finally realized the calm black woman standing in front of them was not simply a chef. She was someone even monsters feared. The entire restaurant remained frozen in shock as Junseo kept his head lowered before Dravon. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The same man who ruled Seoul's underground world with fear was standing obediently before a woman everyone had mistaken for an ordinary chef. Haejun Minwoo's lips parted slightly. His mind refused to process reality. Boss, he whispered weakly. But Junseo didn't even look at him. His attention remained completely fixed on Dravon, like nothing else in the world mattered. And somehow, that moment reminded him of the first day they met, 7 years earlier. Back then, nobody knew the name Junseo. He was just another abandoned teenager, trying to survive the violent streets of Busan after being betrayed by the gang he once trusted. Hungry, injured, alone. Rain poured heavily that night as he stumbled through a dark alley covered in blood. Behind him, angry voices echoed closer. Find him! That bastard stole our money! Junseo tried to run faster, but his legs finally gave out. He collapsed hard onto the wet pavement, breathing painfully. Footsteps approached. 5 men appeared at the entrance of the alley, carrying knives and metal pipes. One of them laughed cruelly. Look at him now. Another grabbed Junseo by the hair and forced his face upward. You should have died quietly. Junseo closed his eyes. He truly thought that was the end. Then suddenly, a voice spoke from behind them. You're blocking the road. Calm, cold. The men turned immediately. A young black woman stood beneath the pouring rain, wearing a dark hoodie and ripped jeans. Her expression was unreadable. One gangster frowned. Get lost. This doesn't concern you. But she didn't move. Instead, her eyes slowly shifted toward the bleeding boy lying on the ground, then back toward the men. You have 10 seconds, she said quietly. The gangsters burst into laughter, and that was their biggest mistake. What happened next became the most terrifying memory of Junseo's life. The woman moved so fast he barely saw it. 1 second, she was standing still. The next, bodies hit the ground. A knife clattered loudly across the pavement. Another man screamed before crashing into a wall. Within moments, all 5 attackers were lying unconscious in the rain. Silence filled the alley. Junseo stared at her in complete shock. The woman calmly walked toward him before crouching slightly. You're still alive, she said. It wasn't concern. It sounded more like observation. Junseo struggled to speak. Who are you? For the first time, the woman smiled faintly. Dravon. That night changed everything. After her father's death, Dravon had survived alone for years. No money, no protection, no family. The world had forced her to become strong long before adulthood. She fought for survival, worked dangerous jobs, learned quickly, trusted nobody. And somewhere along the way, The underworld discovered her talent, a talent so terrifying that powerful organizations began whispering her name in fear. But despite becoming feared across continents, Dravon never abandoned people she considered hers, and somehow, Junseo became one of them. At first, he followed her around like a lost puppy. He annoyed her constantly, talked too much, asked too many questions, started fights he couldn't finish. Yet somehow, he stayed. She fed him, protected him, trained him. When he was weak, she made him stronger. When he was reckless, she disciplined him. When he was angry, she taught him patience. Little by little, the broken boy from Busan became the feared man now standing inside Soul and Soul. But no matter how powerful he became outside, around Dravon, he remained the same stubborn kid she once saved in the rain. Back in the present, Junseo still stood quietly beside her like a scolded child. The restaurant remained deathly silent. Then Dravon finally spoke. Junseo. Yes, boss. Take your people and leave. Her voice was calm, but absolute. Junseo immediately nodded. Yes, boss. Then slowly, Dravon's eyes shifted toward Haejun Minwoo and Seol An. The two men immediately lowered their heads in terror. Gone was their arrogance. Gone was their confidence. Dravon looked at them for a long moment before speaking quietly. If you ever disrespect my staff again? The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. Pray I stay merciful. Neither man dared reply. Junseo grabbed both of them harshly by their shoulders. You heard her. Without another word, the three men turned and left the restaurant together. The black vehicles outside disappeared into the Seoul night moments later. Inside Seoul and Soul, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Seorin stared at Dravon with wide eyes. Chef. Her voice trembled. Who are you? Dravon looked around the restaurant quietly before removing her chef gloves. Then she gave the same calm answer she always did. I'm just the owner. And with that, she turned around and walked calmly back into the kitchen as though nothing had happened at all. Moral lesson of the story. This story teaches us that kindness is never wasted, loyalty should never be forgotten, and respect should never depend on someone's appearance, race, job, or social status. One day, the person you ignore may become the person who changes your life. One day, the person you mock may become the person standing above you. And one day, the person you help may remember your kindness forever. So be humble when you rise. Be kind when you have power. Be loyal when you find good people. Because character will always outlive status. And in the end, people will not remember how powerful you were. They will remember how you treated others. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories, powerful life lessons, and unforgettable characters. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.